Sox in the basement.
Riku Nishida. Have I found a new favorite player, Ed?
You may have.
I think I have.
I think you have.
He's a little 5'6" nugget who was described in pregame interviews before his debut as one of the best baseball players in the organization, which is saying a lot. That's saying the guy knows how to actually play the game of baseball. We're not talking about a super athlete. We're not talking about a guy who's prototypical. Heck, he's 5'6". We're talking about a guy who understands the game, plays it hard, plays baseball. And then he swings like he's Ichiro because he's wearing Ichiro's number because he idolizes Ichiro. I think I saw a video where Jim Tomey gives him an Ichiro signed bat as like a welcome to the Bigs kid kind of moment, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, you did.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he guns guys down from right field.
Like Ichiro.
I mean, like that's cool.
That was I watched that replay a couple of times, and he hoses that ball. The only reason why it even gets interesting at the plate is because, and I forget who was running for the Twins. It doesn't matter because they all get hurt and disappear anyway. But you have a base runner who is so out that he decides he's going to try and run around Drew Romo, who doesn't get juked out of his shoes or anything like that, and gets the tag. But, you watch guys like that play and you realize some of the things that, say, like a Jared Kelenic is missing, who gets DFA'd.
Jared Kelenic, that's the end of your career, I believe, young man. Yes, I don't know. It's possible that's it. Yeah, Jared Kelenic, and when I had
you never changed
from
from who you were, but you realize, what a guy like that who's got all of the tools, supposedly, is missing is, just sort of the ability to play the game, right? I mean, here's a guy who strikes out a lot versus a guy in Nishida who, for his minor league career, walked more than he struck out.
Yeah.
Because he understands the strike zone. He understands what he wants to do at the plate. And so a guy like that is extremely valuable as a member of this team, especially when everybody is hoping that the guy that he seems to most closely match in terms of skill set on the team, Luis Angel Acuna, we're hoping is out the door.
Well, I think he's out the door. I think when Hayes returns, he's out the door. I think that
I would hope so.
Look, I hope so too. But here's the thing about this guy that we just brought up. Riku can run. That's what I was told. I was told he was a stolen base threat. Now, the one thing that he doesn't do is he doesn't play shortstop. And I still believe that he plays second, I want to say. He can't come into the infield. I do believe that Acuna eventually goes, and there's so many outfielders that you see a Riku or an Antonacci move into the infield in the second base position, and Mydroth moves to short when Montgomery needs a day off, or Montgomery has to go to third because Vargas needs a day off, or Vargas is going over the first and Montgomery's going to third, and so Mydroth is going to short. I know that seems absurd, but we talked about at the beginning of the year the idea of versatility, highly valued by this White Sox front office, highly valued by Will Venable. So I think that's eventually what happens. I think that's how Acuna goes. And if Riku is going to provide another spark on your team and clearly looks like he could be far more productive, I think you go that direction rather than continue to hold on to a guy because he could play shortstop as a backup. Because Chase Mydroth can move over and play shortstop as a backup. And so I don't think there's enough that Acuna brings you that you have to continue to hold on to him. And again, what you gave up for him may not play baseball for the rest of the year. And if he does, he's going to hit 220, and you got rid of $20 million. This episode of Sox in the Basement brought to you, as always, by our proud sponsors, Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. Switch to a new age of life. Keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living. Make so they can get around on their own and live independently with stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. Hyatt works with your insurance, has 0% financing for qualified individuals. If you use a CPAP machine, used to be, it sounded like Darth Vader coming out of your bedroom there. It was rough on everybody in the house. Now these things are small, they're compact, they're better, and they don't make a lot of noise. See the latest and greatest at Hyatt. See it all online at hhme.com. I mentioned the front office. Do you think that Jordan Hicks is really injured? Or do you think this was, we got to find a way to justify to the old man that we're giving this guy $17 million over the next 2 years and we don't want him on the staff? How do we get him off of the staff? And then he just has an injury And he's going to sit there all year long, I think. That's my prediction.
I wouldn't rule out that Mike Vassell poked him in the side with his magic wand. And when Hicks grabbed it and went, ow, hey, man, they immediately put him on with a lat strain. So, anything is possible. Clearly the guy...
I think it's a phantom injury, Ed. That's what I believe. I believe it's a phantom injury. Clearly the guy
he does not... I think Will Venable's had enough. I think the staff... Zach Bove has probably thrown his hands up and said, I've tried to get this guy to throw strikes. But he is like Kelenic. Okay. He's got such a track record of what he isn't at this point that there's no longer any real promise of what he could be. Right. So with Hicks, I wouldn't rule out a phantom injury, just like with David Sandlin coming up. I wouldn't necessarily rule out an IL stint for one of the starters who they feel like needs a breather. I mean, they could sit there and say Eric Fetty's blisters are a problem, put him on the IL and just sit there and say he's also in his 30s. He's hitting his dead arm period at the end of May here. And when he feels more comfortable, when his hand feels like it's, got enough skin on it, we'll put him back and then we'll make a decision as to who goes down after that. Because if Sandlin's pitching extremely well and Sean Burke isn't, then maybe Sean Burke goes back to Charlotte. There's a lot of options that could happen. But I don't know that we're not reaching that time of year where, there's going to be some phantom injuries on the pitching staff that, kind of allows them to do some things here with these pitchers, either give them a rest or in the case of Jordan Hicks, get them out of the way. And, and even I wouldn't rule out even with Jordan Hicks being able to sit there and say, well, we can send him on a pretty lengthy rehab assignment to the minors. And down there, maybe we can break him down and figure something out with him. If we have to keep this guy on the payroll, we have to use this guy for the rest of the year. Maybe we can rebuild him into something useful that, we can either unload for a bag of balls or that, we can put back in our bullpen and just use him when we absolutely positively are out of the game.
Well, that makes the most amount of sense. Makes the most amount of sense to say, look, we don't want you here. We can't get rid of you because the old man, he throws around nickels like they're manhole covers. And even though we have one of the lowest payrolls in baseball, we can't tell him that we took on all your salary and got rid of you, even though David Sandlin is here because you took on that salary. When David Sandlin gets here, that's what you took Jordan Hicks for and his money. You told the Red Sox, look, we actually want one of your good prospects. We want somebody that your bloggers, your podcasters, your beat reporters, your fan base, they believe he could be in your starting rotation. We want a guy of that caliber. So we'll pay Hicks's contract because we have a very low payroll and we can make this move. And if you think about it, just think about how crazy it is. You moved Robert Jr. to clear $20 million. You gave $8.5 million to this guy. You gave 10 to Sir Anthony Dominguez. You gave Murakami 17. But I mean, isn't it crazy that Hicks is one of the biggest things that you spend money on? That's why the Sandlin thing is so fascinating to me. Because if it does work out, you really paid for him. Nobody in their right mind looked at the back of Jordan Hicks's baseball card and said, I want that and I want it at that price. Nobody. Okay? There was buyer's remorse from the Red Sox just like there were for the teams that had him before. So you got Sandlin coming up. Opponents hitting 200 in Charlotte against him. 1.25 whip. 0.75 earned run average in 4 appearances. Only 12 innings. So again, this is what they do down there in Charlotte. You're a starting pitcher and you're going out there for 3 innings. They're doing it to everybody down there. They don't want to waste innings on their starters down there. It's weird. But I mean, if it ends up working, then they're very smart and they're very forward thinking. I don't know. But that's what this Sandlin coming up is really one of the more interesting storylines of the year. And there's so many of them. But to me, what you do is you go out and you grab this guy and you upgrade your prospect return by taking on a bunch of money. And now after you've done that, you want to see if he's going to work out. Meanwhile, you're trying to hide the money because the pitcher that you got in Hicks is terrible. So now he goes on the IL. And I think you're right about that. I think he goes down there. I think he eventually gets a rehab thing. I think they try to fix him. And you watch. If they can't fix him, he ain't coming back up here. He'll be on the 60-day. That's exactly what will happen to him. And I wouldn't be shocked by it at all. Pre-game, post-game, in-game. Cork and Carry at the Park, the place to be. 33rd and Princeton, in the shadow of the ballpark. award-winning menu of burgers and ballpark favorites. That place is rocking these days during home games. Great home series going on right now. Again, that's why they've got to start paying attention to who's contributing and who isn't, and shaking some of the crap off of the team and always improving, because this is a big week. And you beat up on the Twins here. You play well here against your divisional opponents as they start coming into town and you start going and visiting them. You become more and more apt to say, all right, I know it's early. I know we're not a World Series contender. We're not giving up anything here. We're not gonna screw up the team in the long term to try to go for it in 2026, but we're going to be competitive. And that's a decision that I think they have to make, and I think they're making that decision to be as competitive as possible. And you can enjoy it at Cork and Carry with an extensive bar, rotation of craft beers, familiar favorites, spirits, and wines. They are your home base for White Sox pregame, postgame, in-game viewing parties, the home of Sox in the Basement. Cork and Carry at the park. See more at corkandcarry.com. And you got Riku up here. I think Acuna's going to go. You got Sandlin coming up here. I don't think we're going to see Hicks for a long time. I was really surprised that Grant Taylor gave up a grand slam. I hope he doesn't lose faith in him. I still think he's the best thing coming out of the bullpen.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like, I know he had a bad game, but Sir Anthony's still more shaky than that guy. That's what I think.
Oh, yeah. Everybody who comes out of the bullpen is going to have a bad game. Someone's going to get turned around. You're going to make a pitch that guy just gets a hold of. I remember back in the day when for some reason Carlos Lee could hit Mariano Rivera and nobody could figure out why, right? Just everybody has something, and Grant Taylor is still young and still working on things, but he is the best thing out of the bullpen. Sir Anthony, frankly, it's questionable whether or not he walks the first batter that he faces on Memorial Day. If Drew Romo doesn't have the wherewithal to challenge the call and use the ABS system and find out that it did clip the strike zone, then you got a guy on first, nobody out, and here we go again. But there's going to be probably more churning on the pitching staff than I think the lineup, because I feel like the lineup's coming together enough that even in conversations about what happens to the outfield coming up, right? Now that Nishida's here as well. You sit there and you look at Everson Pereira, who in the early part of the season we were praising as one of the better hitters on the team, and you're starting to wonder, where does he even fit in with the guys that are on the team already? And, where does Austin Hayes fit in? Where does Randall Grichuk fit in? Where do these guys, how do they use them? And it's not like there's an embarrassment of all-star talent or anything like that, but there's enough guys contributing, and Will Venable has enough, basically has enough ammunition in terms of position players that we've seen him push the right buttons to be able to get some wins out of these guys. The question is going to be going forward, how well do they pitch? And, do you have enough there? And I think the early part of the season, you have to look at it and go, not quite.
Well, here's the thing.
Not quite enough.
You mentioned Venable. I want to talk about him a little bit. I do. After watching this past weekend, one, he's really predictable. Like I'm sitting around with Dad at the lake cottage, beautiful Rochester, Indiana, on beautiful Lake Manitou this weekend. I got the whole family up there. We had another Lanuti family emergency up there. We did. There's always something bad that happens. Last year, I stepped on a bourbon glass playing wiffle ball in my bare feet because I'm an idiot. Had to get a bunch of stitches. This year, one of my nephews shot another one of my nephews in the eye.
Oh, my God.
With one of these silly, I don't know, it's like a little pellet that's filled with water. I don't know what it is. It's supposed to kind of crack off the skin or something like that. They're all running around doing this. Hit him perfectly in the eye. He's wearing a patch right now. I keep calling him a pirate. He's supposedly going to keep his vision. It was a little touch and go, though. It's one of those Lanuti family weekends. In the middle of all that, though, watching the ball game, and my father's like, what is Venable doing here? It's like 6 pinch hitters in a row. I mean, he's exaggerating. And I said, every time he gets a righty starter and a lefty comes in, he changes half his lineup immediately. And every time he has a lefty starter and a righty comes in, he changes half his lineup immediately. And he goes, And what happens if the other manager switches back? And I go, well, then he's screwed. I mean, he's got some very predictable things that he does. You know what I'm saying? The bunting thing is my biggest complaint. Did you see the one he had second and third? He had second and third, he had one out. He's got Acuna on deck. And Peters bunts. And not only does he bunt, with Colson Montgomery standing on third base, who's not super fast, Montgomery's not in motion to the plate. Again, there's one out, and Peters bunts to the first base side, where the first baseman has nobody to hold on, so he's the closest person. Because, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention in this situation, the infield's in on the grass.
Of course.
Now, I'm sorry, folks. You can't justify that. In fact, Ozzie Guillen said it in the postgame. When you see Ozzie and Chuckaroo sitting there on the postgame and they're both criticizing Will Venable, he's screwed up. I don't know how you justify all four of the infielders in on the grass, second and third and one out. Acuna's the next batter coming up, and you're going to give up an out and nobody's going to advance because you're going to bunt it to the guy who's so close to home plate, he could reach out and touch Peters. You just gave up an out for nothing. Montgomery isn't moving. What is the purpose of that play? Even if Montgomery's moving, he's probably out at home plate. Meanwhile, the pitcher that's out there can't find home plate that inning. Can't find it. That's why we have second and third. But you have your worst hitter and biggest automatic out on the team waiting to come up, and your plan is what there? There are times...
let a guy who can actually get a base hit and knock both of those guys in. Give him up.
He plays the righty lefty and those matchups too much. He is convinced that Peters can only get a hit from one side of the plate and the other side of the plate he's only good for bunting. He will scuttle his entire lineup if a manager brings in a left-handed reliever for one inning in the fifth. And if he doesn't get the lead at that point, that manager's going to bring in a right-handed pitcher in the sixth inning, and now all of a sudden your lineup's not set up properly. He is in love with the righty-lefty matchup, more than I think any manager I've ever seen in my entire life. His belief that 50% of his lineup is only good for platooning. I mean, sure, I know that we're not the Dodgers, but I don't know if that's the right way to manage a team. And before you think that I just don't like Will Venable, I love what he's doing in the clubhouse. I love how he's got these guys believing in themselves, and he has pulled the right strings many times so far this year. But that's his Achilles heel. If I'm studying tape on him, if I'm an opposing manager coming in, I'm using openers to get half his lineup out of theirs where his bench is emptied by the third inning. Or I'm making sure that about the fourth or fifth inning, if my righty is struggling, it's a lefty coming in. He's pitching to 3 or 4 batters right at the spot where Venable's going to change over the entire bottom part of the lineup, and then I'm bringing a righty back in again. And I've just shut down the White Sox offense. And you might as well move your infield in bunt situations because he isn't going to pull back the bat and try to hit it past you. And that was the weirdest thing. They did that in the Seattle series. They brought their infield in that ninth inning and they swung away. And look what happened. Ball goes off of Josh Naylor's hands. The other one kind of gets through where it would have never been a base hit if the infield was back. And you won a game that way. And then a couple days later, he falls into this thing where it's like somewhere on my card, it says bunt no matter what here. And the defense is set up in the perfect spot for it. What are you doing? Unless the explanation is that Peters just did that on his own, and then he's stupid and he should be benched for a day or so. But I think that's the manager. And that was the maddening thing about this weekend. Look, they had a bad 2-4 road trip. I wanted to split, and San Francisco's a terrible team. That was really disappointing. Over the weekend, they at least split because they won the game on Monday against the Twins. I don't know how the week is going to go. Again, I don't expect them to beat the whole world here. But we are starting to learn a little bit about the manager, and there are going to be things from time to time that are going to drive you bonkers.
Yeah, it's not that he pinch hits. It's that he pinch hits too early. And I can understand certain situations, certain guys, right? Like if, let's say, for example, you've got a situation where you've got a left-handed batter, and I would have picked on Kelnick, but I'll have to pick on Tristan Peters now because he's the guy that would be in this situation. You sit there and you've got a tough lefty and you've got, second and third, nobody out or one out or something like that. And you want Hill up there. Okay. Cause it's a situation where we can take the lead, add on runs, whatever, catch up. Like sometimes it might make sense, but you're right. It happens too often where he just platoons for the sake of platooning. And Andrew Benintendi can hit a lefty. I suspect Tristan Peters can hit lefties. I suspect Sam Antonacci can hit lefties. And I suspect also that in the ninth inning, you would rather have an Antonacci up there than Acuna. And and now he's got another lefty bat in Nishida that he's going to have to manage. And so it's at some point you got to figure out if these guys can hit same-handed pitching, because a lot of the righties on your bench have proven over the course of their careers that they are better against lefties. And so pulling the plug on these guys truly, I mean, thank God his catchers are both switch hitters right now.
But only one of them do I have any confidence in. Okay. Look, Edgar Carroll had a big moment. It was amazing. It was awesome. I haven't seen him do very much since then. Okay. And Drew Romo's still hitting under the Mendoza line, but he hits home runs.
And he walks.
He walks. On. All right. We're still in desperate need of Kyle Teal coming back and getting like 2/3 of the starts behind home plate for catching to be settled. However they plan on playing this with these guys. But yeah, I mean, I think we're making the same point. We're saying it differently. I don't understand like the urge to, like he does this on, I want to say Monday's game against the Twins, where he basically, no, it wasn't Monday. It was Sunday's game. I want to say his last game is against San Francisco. In the fifth inning, he just went for it. There was a pitching change, if I remember it right. And he switches over about 3-4 guys in the lineup. And then after the grand slam and you're down by 4, half your lineup isn't set up right for what the Giants bring in for the rest of the game. And the game's basically over. And so he went for it. I mean, that's what he did. It's the middle of the game. It's like the fifth inning. He goes, I'm going to bring in a bunch of pinch hitters here. I'm going for it in the fifth. I'm going to see if I can get some runs. He ties up the ball game. It works in that moment. And then Grant Taylor comes in, who's his best relief pitcher, and he goes, I'm going to bring in Taylor. He's going to shut these guys down, and we're going to go to the end of this game and find a way to get one more run and win this game 5-4. And when Taylor gives up the grand slam, that's it, because you've flipped your lineup so much with all these guys, and you've emptied your bench in the fifth inning. So it comes back and it bites him in the butt. And I'm not saying he's always wrong for doing it or he's always right for doing something. I'm just saying it's a tendency. I'm saying if I'm an opposing manager, this is my scouting report on Will Venable. And there's too much bunting. There just is. There's a time for it and there's a time it's not. You got Ozzie Guillen, the guy who we all love for the small ball, right? Remember Ozzie Ball?
Oh, he loved bunting.
Right. Even though Ozzie Ball included a bunch of guys that could hit a lot of home runs. In big moments, who got big base hits, right? Like Jermaine Dye wasn't laying down.
But he has Paul Konerko in his line.
Yeah, Jermaine Dye, Carl Everett, those guys weren't laying down bunts. I don't remember Creedy laying down a lot of bunts. I don't remember Konerko laying down bunts. I don't think I ever saw Frank Thomas lay down a bunt in my life, and he was there for the first half of the year. We give Ozzie credit for small ball, and Ozzie was in shock. Like they got to that point in the post game. And I know I'm not going to say it exactly right, but I'm pretty sure he says it like, I don't care what Will's explanation was for that. He's wrong.
Right.
Sox in the Basement listeners trying to make the most of your money. Give a call to Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor. Located on the corner of 111th and Kedzie, but serving the Chicagoland area, Tom has a get-to-know-you approach and a do-the-right-thing attitude. He's been doing this for decades. It's all about knowing your options when you're investing and planning for your retirement. No matter what stage you are at, it costs nothing to check in with Tom. Give Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor, a call today, 773-779-0023. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
And some of this is also, Will Venable has got to find himself as a manager in all of this as well. Now, he obviously, he sat there and learned from Bruce Bochy for years and years and years. And, the X's and O's of a baseball game, we've talked about this when we were comparing Ricky Renneria, Tony La Russa, You can have managers who meddle too much, and you can have managers who are way too passive. And Venable's got to find the balance between I'm doing too much and I'm not doing enough, right? Because we've seen it work both ways, where guys rot on the bench who would actually be useful in a certain situation, or pitchers are left in too long. And, and again, Will Venable, if he wants to affect the outcome of games in a positive way, he's got to continue to put guys in a position to succeed. And there is something to be said about that. But you're right. The absolute turnover of the lineup, it's becoming clear that there are guys on this team who deserve the benefit of the doubt and who deserve to be in there at all times, who are not platoon players, and, and give them a chance to shine, give them a chance to do something, especially in the middle of the game where it's not life or death at that point. It's not the same as an 8th inning, 9th inning situation where we have seen him pinch hit and put guys in a position where it's like, okay, this is how they won that game. If he doesn't do this, they may not win.
Listen, everybody's caught on to this. If you go to Roster Resource, Fangraphs Roster Resource, which is a great tool to kind of see the lineup and options and who's available and stuff like that, they'll put out a projected lineup and they'll take a look at how the manager is using things. You can flip around and toggle to every team. The White Sox, I believe, in a quick toggle, are the only team in which all 4 members of the bench are part of a split platoon with 4 members in the projected starting lineup, based upon their usage. Benintendi, Peters, Romo, and Nishida are all in a platoon with Acuna, Grichuk, Hill, and Carroll. That's how they list them, because that's how the manager uses it. If Fangraphs has that figured out, if we've got that figured out, opposing managers have that figured out. So, I mean, right. I'm just saying, don't get too predictable here. He's a young manager who's out on his own, really, with the first team that he can actually really manage, because last year he was just hanging on and getting his feet wet with no expectations whatsoever, right? This is where we're going to see some of the bumpiness here. This is something they've got to sit down and discuss behind closed doors. Like, Will, every once in a while, buddy, you got to switch this up. It's really predictable.
Yeah, the only platoon he really should have that everybody knows about is his catchers, because Romo and Caro, like most catching situations in the major leagues, are essentially, they're going to be used in tandem the entire time. There's really no reason for Tristan Peters to be overly platooned, but I could see him being in a platoon somewhat. There's really nothing else there. I'm all for the DH spot being a rotation a little bit more, because Benintendi can get hot, but then he can get awfully cold. And you've got other guys that could, certainly stretch their legs a little bit and spend some time in that DH role. Nishida, I don't know what they're going to do with him at this point. Like, that's
play that firecracker every day. Play that firecracker every day.
And that's what I'm hoping.
I just want him out there.
I want him
swinging like Ichiro, running out of the box and throwing guys out and being really excited when he runs into the dugout. I mean, it's fun. They're fun. Please don't take this show as the fact that I didn't find this team fun. This is fun. Oh, this is so much fun. All right, like, I don't know. Just stop bunting so much. Just stop bunting. You're hurting me with the bunt. Just calm down. Just a little bit. Just a little bit less bunting, please. Pretty please, with sugar on top.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.